Welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast, your guide to optimizing your life one health tip at a time. This podcast is designed to entertain and inform, not to provide medical or health advice. Always consult your doctor when it comes to your personal health or before you make any changes to your diet, exercise, or lifestyle.
Welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. I'm Dr. K. This is Coach Kyle. Tell us what we're talking about.
Guys, there's so much talk going on about these GLP-1 agonists. So we're talking about Mounjaro, Wegovy, Ozempic, that's the big one. But what we're going to talk about in this episode is we're really going to get into why you should be taking these things, why you shouldn't be taking these things, who it's for, some pricing stuff, optimal dosing, what you should be eating. We're just going to really break this down. This is going to be the ultimate podcast on your resource to GLP-1 agonists. So hang on and enjoy the ride.
Let's say Ozempic like 7 more times for the algorithm.
Yeah, Ozempic. Yeah, literally, the Ozempic is like the buzzword of them, right?
I think it's like one of the most searched terms in 2023 is Ozempic.
Yeah. So Ozempic's the most popular, but why is that? Because they weren't the first.
No, the first was, we actually looked this up, was Trulicity. I think it was one of the Kardashians that came out and was like, hey, I lost a bunch of weight with Ozempic.
I think what it was Ozempic was the first to be approved for weight loss, as opposed to everything else was approved for controlling type 2 diabetes.
And just happened to make you lose weight.
Yep. Ozempic was, I think, the first FDA approval for weight loss, and it was a big one. And then I think Mounjaro came through. So Ozempic and Wegovy are the same thing.
Just different brands. Yeah, they're different brands.
Yeah. And Wegovy is for diabetes control, and the Ozempic is for weight loss. They're actually the same company that makes them, believe it or not. What we're really talking about is it's semaglutide. So that's the actual chemical name of the compound. And Mounjaro is tirzepatide. And so, Dr. K, would you mind explaining what these things are?
So they are what's called GLP-1 agonists. So GLP-1 agonists, they're a type of hormone secreted by GLP-1 is a type of hormone secreted by your pancreas. It controls your insulin secretion levels. And so when you take these medications, they basically force your body to make more insulin. As a side effect, it also increases your satiety. Basically, it makes you feel full sooner. So that's the two big things it does. It ups your insulin so your sugars drop. It makes you feel fuller sooner. It delays gastric emptying as well. And it prevents you from making more glucagon. Glucagon tells your body, hey, we're running low on sugar, make more sugar. So that's kind of the big things it does.
Yeah. So really, in layman's terms, basically is it makes you feel full by keeping food in your stomach for longer and keeping your blood sugar level by producing more insulin. It's probably as simple as I can put it. We don't want to dive real deep into exactly how it works because it can get complicated, but that is kind of it in a nutshell. What's interesting is the tirzepatide so that's the Mounjaro, is the second generation. And so tirzepatide works on GLP-1 as well as GIP, which is kind of a similar type one, just making it more effective. It's been shown in the trials to be more effective for weight loss. And generally, people have reported less side effects. So that's basically what it is. Where should we go here from now? I mean, we got why we should take it, why we shouldn't take it, who's candidates, that type of stuff. You want to go into that?
I feel like we always do the negatives first, just so the idea is always, hey, this is not the one solution drug for everyone. So let's talk about negatives.
Negatives. Well, I mean, to start, there are side effects. There's a pretty extensive side effect profile, and if you guys have not seen the news by now about the scaremongering with the gastro paralysis stuff going around, where your stomach freezes and does not process food correctly, we'll talk about that a bit. But I mean, your main negatives, there's two different classes of negatives when you look at GLP-1s. You're looking at side effect negatives, and then you're looking at these kind of long-term effects on how they might affect you. So in terms of side effects, we see redness, itchiness at the injection site. That's probably the most mild of the side effects. We see an extreme slowing in your gastric emptying, so this could lead to gastric paralysis. That we see, what else? Yeah, nausea, vomiting.
See, I've got a whole list of side effects actually right here for when I tell patients because I can never remember them. But it's basically nausea, abdominal pain, diarrhea. It can cause kidney or gallbladder issues. It can cause pancreatitis. It can cause low blood sugar. It can cause allergic reactions. Those are kind of the common ones.
Yeah. And I know it's not, I think it's contraindicated for people who have a history of thyroid cancer, if I'm not mistaken.
It's people or familial history of thyroid cancer.
So if you have thyroid cancer anywhere in your family, this is not an option for you.
It's not a good option because there was some mouse studies that show that increases the risk of thyroid cancer in people that already had it.
Yeah. So a lot of these acute side effects, it's individual. Some people deal with them very severely, and some people don't get any of them. This is very typical of any drug, right? Side effect profile has statistical percentages on how many people get it. However, this drug is interesting because if you actually dose it right and you do the right lifestyle changes, you can actually mitigate almost all of the side effects and have a very successful run.
Yeah, I think the biggest side effects, nausea, abdominal pain, are people continue eating the same unhealthy foods that they were eating before they started it, don't do anything, and just hope they're going to lose the weight with it. And then when you eat carbs or sugar with these, you feel terrible. And stomach paralysis, I think most cases of it are that people took double their dose.
So really what this comes down to, and we'll get into when we're talking about how to do it optimally, we'll get into it a little bit more in depth, but it really comes down to how to dose, how much you're dosing, and then the lifestyle changes that go along with actually taking this medication. And so that probably leads us to our first group of people who should not take it at all, is people who are not willing to modify their lifestyle. So if you are not willing to change what you eat or what you do on a daily basis, this is not the drug for you. It's so true though. Like if you are not willing to put in the work to change for better habits, this is basically a crutch. It's a tool. So it'll help you get to where you want to go. But if you're not going to do the work to change who you are and the life you live, it's not going to be a long-term solution for you.
Correct. The worst thing you could actually do is not change anything, lose weight, but you end up losing a bunch of muscle weight if you don't do this properly, and then regain even more fat weight after you come off of it. So now you've decreased your muscle levels and increased your fat content.
Yep. And so that's exactly leading us to like that second camp of negatives, which is those long-term effects. So that is the number one long-term effect to watch out for is the weight loss that you're experiencing. If you're not doing the correct lifestyle changes and food changes and exercise, you'll lose more muscle than fat or equal, basically reducing your metabolic rate. So you're burning less while you're just living. And so when you go off it, you basically compound fat and you gain it back so much more quickly than you even lost it. That, and again, what comes with that, not eating enough protein, losing muscle mass, you have like your bones start to become weak, brittle. We're seeing an increase in back surgeries because with people taking these drugs, because they're just not getting enough nutrients to support bone health. Things like that. Other long-term side effects. So one of the ways this thing works is it increases your insulin. We don't like increasing insulin over the long term because you could lead to insulin insensitivity. And now the thought is if you eat less, your insulin, even though you're making more, it has less to react to. So over time it'll come down. And yes, that is true if you are eating a good, clean, healthy diet. If you are not helping yourself in your insulin insensitivity, because if you keep eating a bunch of sugar while on this, your insulin is going to be driven up by the medication, and then you're going to become more and more insensitive to it, compounding the diabetes potentiality of this medication. So this is something to be very careful in the long term. Last long-term thing I want to hit on is, so this medication, like most peptides, goes through receptor attenuation. So as you take it, it becomes less effective for you. So that's why you generally increase dose. Once you get to the max dose, if you're there for an extended period of time, eventually it'll become ineffective. So the goal here, I work with people and doctors who are using these things. The goal here is to go up and not actually get to the top, because we don't actually want to go near where all the side effects are, and then scale back down and go off it, cycle. So, and we'll get into how to optimally use it with that cycle a little bit more, but long-term effects is it will stop working for you.
So I think one of the biggest problems with this is, unfortunately, people get greedy with their weight loss. And so, our patients come in, they're like, oh, I'm only losing 1 pound a week. And my friend Sue is losing 4 pounds a week. So I want to up my dose. Like, we don't up your dose until it stops working, because like you just mentioned, you can't go back down easily. If you're at 1 milligram, you can't drop to 0.5 milligram next week, because it just won't work to 0.5 milligram anymore. So we always extend out until you're losing less than 0.5 pound a week. Then we can talk about upping you to the next dose. So stretch each dose.
I like that concept of stretching each dose. We want to basically use the dose that has effect for us by using the least amount of medication. And when it comes to optimal weight loss, kind of like Dr. K said, I don't care that your friend over there is losing 4 pounds a week. That is not optimal. It's too fast. So she's losing muscle. So we want to be in that sweet spot, that 1 to 2 pounds a week. That's really kind of where we want to stay. Because if you're there, the chance of you losing muscle is less than if you're over that. If you go over 2 pounds a week, it's possible, but it's very difficult to retain your muscle if you're going faster than that.
Yep. At that point, if you want to go faster, you're in the gym for like 6 hours a day, lifting heavy every day. And then you have a chance to lose more than 2 pounds a week safely.
Yeah. It's very tricky, and most people are not going to be doing the lifestyle things that you need to retain that muscle if you go more than 2 pounds a week. So that's kind of the target weight loss time. Okay, so we've talked about negatives, short-term side effects, long-term side effects. Where do you want to go from here?
Let's talk about why people should take this.
So it's interesting because you see a lot of people who are not overweight taking this kind of off-label. A lot of bodybuilders, the professional athlete kind of need to drop weight group. This is very interesting because they're actually just taking it at super, super low doses for short periods of time, just to lose 5, 10, 15 pounds to prepare them for their competition or to help their diet and just make it easier. In my opinion, that's like an excellent use for this medication. Like, hey, we have excellent diet and lifestyle strategies already in place. Let's just use this medication to make the dieting not suck. And then we can get to our goal, and then we can come right off it, and boom, we're done. So things like that, I think, are a great use. I think it can be great for people who are overweight as well. I don't want to sidestep the fact that it is amazing at helping people lose weight. It's a very powerful tool. So what I tell clients who work with me who are talking to their doctor about wanting to take it, I advise them, listen, wait to talk to your doctor until we've established 1 to 3 months of routine weightlifting and protein intake. Once you've got these strategies and you have these, if you have those habits, if you hit your body weight in grams of protein and you go lift weights at least 2 or 3 times a week, then I think you could be a good candidate for successful use of one of these GLP-1 agonists.
That is a much better way to do it than trying to change your lifestyle after. Because, you started, you're on a clock. You can't then slowly start adjusting your life.
Exactly. Yep. So what, and I've done this with clients before. So basically they've kind of reduced their carb intake some, they've increased their protein, they've been going to the gym, then they go on medication, and then the habits are there. And then basically they've already done the hard work. Now it's just riding out the medication time. So that I think is very important. Also, it helps if you do this beforehand, it helps when you're on it to alleviate the side effects. If you're eating clean, high protein, high fiber, good vegetables, and not eating a bunch of carbs, a bunch of sugar, alcohol too, that'll hurt you too. So if you're not eating those things, you're much less likely to get the diarrhea, the gastric distress, the nausea, because basically you want to give yourself as much clean fuel as possible so there aren't gut issues that go along with this medication.
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, those are kind of the two groups of people that I think it can really help. Is there any other major use cases you see for it?
I mean, that's pretty much it.
I do have one more anecdotal one. So a lot of people are seeing a reduction of like addictive tendencies. So they're seeing a reduction in alcohol intake. They're seeing a reduction in smoking. They're seeing a reduction in gambling, things like that. They think this is because of kind of the rewiring of the reward pathways in the brain. It's still anecdotal, but there are a lot of studies being used are going on right now looking into it for alcoholism and things like that. We actually touched on that in our alcoholism episode. This could be a use case for someone who is maybe dealing with some addictive tendencies, maybe like a super, super low dose, so it doesn't crush their appetite, but it could help with kind of neuroinflammation and reprogramming the brain. So that's kind of an anecdotal use case. Again, we're not your doctor, so go work with your doctor on any of this stuff. We're just telling you what we see.
Mm-hmm. And we'll touch more on that dopamine pathway when we do our naltrexone talk.
Okay, so that's who should take it, who shouldn't take it. Side effects, short and long.
Do we want to mention dosing?
Yeah. I want to speak to dosing because the companies recommend. I've read the actual official pamphlets. So it's different for Ozempic and Mounjaro because they're different medications, but essentially they recommend starting at about 1/4 of a milligram on semaglutide or Ozempic, and then double it after 4 weeks, and then you double it again after 4 weeks, and then you go up a little bit, 50% up after 4 weeks, and then you double it after 4 weeks. And then you're at your max dose. You end at about 3 milligrams, 3.4, something like that.
I've never actually, the most I've ever given is 2. But yeah, don't do that. No, don't do that. Stretch each dose. If you start in the 1/4 milligram, you're losing a pound a week for 8 weeks. You're not going to up your dose until you stop losing weight.
Yeah. So we want, and when you stop losing weight, we're not talking about a weight loss stop for 1 week. We want to see 2 or 3 weeks consistently at the same weight. Then you can bump the dose. And the thing is, like, you don't necessarily have to go up double either. So especially, it's not so big of a deal on the first one because it's such a small dose to a so small dose. But on that second one, when you're going from 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram, that's a big jump. So if you want to take, if you take the compounding pharmacy version of it, you can work with your doctor and you can inject however much you want. It's not in a pen. So if you want to go from 0.5 milligram to 0.75, that's a very good strategy. Also, again, this will help alleviate the side effects. Most of the side effects that people experience are too high of a dose for their body going too quick. So going up slowly. I recommend spending more than 4 weeks at each dose, if at all possible. Like Dr. K said, stretch it. And then maxing out. I don't like people, the thought of people going to the max dose, for me, because of those side effects, is not a great thought. So I like the thought of maxing out at about 60% of that maximum dose. That puts us in kind of that range of we're not going to get stomach paralysis.
And yeah, honestly, if you're having side effects and you up your dose, you're going to have more side effects.
Yeah. So you're just compounding the problems. So, basically semaglutide, when you get up to about 2, like Dr. K said, where he goes is about his maximum, that's where you probably want to stay and then cycle back down. And then I want to hit tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro. So the starting dose is 2.5 milligrams there, and the max is 15. And so usually we don't want to go over like 10 there. I've gone up to 8 on that. It was like a lot of hunger crushing. Like a lot. Like I'm a big dude. I was struggling to get 2,000 calories a day. Like really struggling. So probably about 10 milligrams there is maximum. And then when you're going back down, we want to slowly go back down. So just how you phased up, you also want to phase down. And the reason this is because you're messing with your blood sugar levels. So if you drop this medication, if you're on 10 milligrams of Mounjaro or tirzepatide one day, and next week you don't take any, and you don't take any the week after, what that's going to do is your insulin that has been pumping to keep your blood sugar low, that signal is gone. So your blood sugar is going to skyrocket. So what needs to happen is you phase down slowly over the same schedule you went back up, is the simplest way to do it. You could go a little faster on the way down, but the simplest way to do it is just kind of mirror it, have a pyramid, and then phase back down.
Yeah, talk to your doctor. Come up with a plan before you start of how you're going to approach this.
Yep, that's a very good point. Don't just go in and say, doctor, give me the drug. you should really do your research on it, know your plan on how you're going to approach it. And then that way you can have a system for, hey, this is when I'm going to go up, this is when I'm going to go off, and we can be off at this point, and then if I want to cycle back on, I wait this many months. I recommend going at least 2 to 3 months in between cycles. Best practices is the number of months you're on is the number of months you should cycle off.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, that's best practices. So that's dosing in a nutshell.
Let's talk about compounded.
Yeah. So go ahead. You probably know a little bit about this in the world you live in.
Yeah, almost every state has what's called a compounding pharmacy, which is a pharmacy that is able to make, they're not the manufacturer of the medication. They just have the same base ingredients, like the generic form of it, and they can make it custom for you. And so that's been going on a lot because these medications, the Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, they're all on the FDA's shortage list. All these pharmacies are allowed to compound it, in essence, make it a ton cheaper. Ozempic, for example, is about $200 a month instead of $1,000 a month. And the way they get around this, for the most part, is they do one of two things. They either make it the salt form of it, and the salt forms do not work. You do not want the salt forms. Or the other thing is they add something to it. Usually it's a B vitamin like B12 or B3 or B9. And these B vitamins, they do have a secondary benefit of they're also lipotropic vitamins. They help you burn a little fat, curb a little appetite. But they just combine it with those vitamins and then send it to you in a bottle. It does come in a pen, like you said, so you can actually adjust your dose much easier.
Yeah. And this is actually very important for people to know because, one, you want an effective form. And two, if you're not covered by insurance on this, you don't need to pay the full price. Like, find a compounding pharmacy, you can pay about a fifth of what it costs from the actual manufacturer. And what's crazy is that's the actual price of it in the rest of the world. So basically, they mark up what it costs Americans to subsidize what it costs other people in other countries.
Yeah, there's been congressional hearings about that now, about them asking these drug companies why it's so much cheaper everywhere except America.
Because they're like, Americans will spend money on it. This is supply and demand 101. I mean, that's important. Yeah.
Let's not dive too deep into that. You guys can do your own research on that one. What I will say, a lot of people are scared of compounded medications. There's no reason to be scared of them. As long as it's a good, trustworthy pharmacy and your doctor, if they're willing to prescribe you compounded medications, they should know and have a pharmacy that they trust. So as long as that pharmacy is good, you should have absolutely no problems taking these medications.
Yeah. I would definitely, regardless of actually whether it's covered by insurance or not, I would prefer to go through a compounding pharmacy to begin with because of the ability to adjust the dose. Now, usually it's harder to get medications covered in a compounding pharmacy, but if insurance is not covering it, definitely go to a compounding pharmacy.
Okay. I think that about wraps it up, right?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're going to take one of these medications, what you want to do is first establish healthy lifestyle routines. So high protein intake along with strength training before these medications are introduced. Once you introduce them, stair step slowly from the starting dose. Stretch your dose for as long as you can while still losing weight. If you hit 2 or 3 weeks without losing weight, that's a plateau, then you can up your dose. You only ever want to get to about 60% of the max dose, and then you want to cycle back down. Cycle back down, mirror your cycle up, and then your off period is equal to the number of months you were on. When you're on that off period, you want to continue to focus on building muscle. So you want to focus on the protein and the strength training, probably increase the strength training, put on as much muscle as possible. So when you go back on your second cycle, you can lose even more fat.
Okay, perfect. So that wraps up the GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Trulicity, and all the other random ones. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Dr. K, or the OsteoDoc.
And I'm Kyle, Coach Kyle, at Toxin Free Kyle on Instagram.
We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Peak Performance Podcast, your #1 resource for today's top health hacks and facts. You can follow us on Instagram at the Peak Performance Pod or on X at Peak Perform Pod. You can also check out our website and weekly blogs at peakperformancepodcast.online. Again, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. We put out a new podcast every Thursday. The content of this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purposes of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, carefully read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the product. Information found or received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem or should you have any healthcare questions, please promptly call or see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Coach Kyle, Dr. K, and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of the information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein.